A pity Willem is not with us. Were he to see what lies before our eyes, caught a whiff of the burnt bodies, perhaps he would see with whom he now consorts, whom he allowed in our home with nary a fight.
If it be your majesty's wish, I shall send a rider to the prince with her.
I wish nothing of the sort. I will not correspond with the enemy.
Where's the king? Why'd he leave us a black-clad mercy?
Meave's ears caught the sound of a ruckus coming from the camp.
Feet! Inglet! A pox upon you all!
It was her quartermaster, hurling oaths at the peasants she had freed from the Nilfgaardian slave convoy. A few had stolen supplies under the cover of darkness and escaped into the woods. Terror and dread gripped the other freed prisoners. Meave mulled over what to do with them, and Reynard, as always, offered some advice.
'Tis high time they went off on their own, your grace. They are too great a hindrance. They slow our march, divert our soldiers from more important tasks. And now this.
Gascon was listening to their conversation. Meave shot him a questioning look.
I opposed taking them in. So, for consistency, I now oppose forcing them to leave. We made their miserable lives our responsibility, did we not? Well then, that is a burden we cannot simply shrug off.
Let us not mince words. We cast off these peasants now, they shall die.
Meave said in the end.
Let them stay. But I want them watched. They cause any more trouble, military justice they shall face. Understood?
The freed prisoners sighed with relief. The infantrymen assigned to watch over them, however, grumbled their disapproval of the Queen's decision.
'Tis an army, not a shelter,
they said. Meave's ears surely caught the complaint. But the Queen had never let the opinions of others guide her in such matters, trusting only her own judgment.
Not liking the looks of this,
Gascon said, furrowing his brow. Meave followed his gaze. Before them, beside the road, stood a hut with a scorched thatch roof.
Why?
Huts abandoned, yet dried fruit and mushrooms hang from the eaves. Famine raging all around and no one's been tempted. I'd send a scout if I were you.
The Queen did as Gascon suggested, and sent 3 infantrymen to reconnoitre. They entered the hut and found only silence, that was soon broken by a blood-curdling growl. The soldiers ran out at full speed, tripping over their own legs. Meave drew her sword, convinced a horde of neckers or ghouls would soon attack. But her fears proved unfounded. Instead of monsters, out of the hut came a shaggy dog, a torn scrap of fabric clutched in its teeth.
Milady!
One of the soldiers began, his face red with embarrassment, and his hands covering a hole in his breeches.
Was dark as a well inside, and that hound, it jumped out at us all of a sudden, biting it and snapping.
Bad boy,
Gascon said with a smile, then pulled a hunk of dried sausage from his bag. Bought by this generous offering, the dog calmed down at once. Further examination showed the dog was the hut's only resident. Like many others in Eldain, its owners had disappeared without a trace. Their loyal mutt still guarded the premises, waiting for his master's return.
let's take him with us.
Gascon said.
Otherwise, he'll die here, of his own hunger or someone else's.
A watchful sentry like this could prove useful in our camp,
said the Queen.
Fine. He can join. But he shall need a name.
How about Reynard?
Proposed Gascon, a cheeky grin smeared across his face.
That way, he'll come when you call, sit on command, and always be a heel. Always heel, that is.
Watch your words,
said Reynard, hand tightly gripping the hilt of his sword.
or you'll learn I'm not at all as tame as you believe.
Enough, both of you. That's an order. As for you...
The Queen took a good look at the dog, who still had a scrap of fabric in his teeth.
Since it seems you've a taste for the cloth of the nether regions, I dub you... Knickers. Will that do?
The dog wagged its tail vigorously, as if thoroughly pleased with its new name. Meave's company marched off, a furry new recruit richer. Meave and her companions neared the Moulderwood, a dense, ancient forest of trees whose tangled branches had witnessed the conjunction of the spheres. It was not until King Vidamont's day that a road was finally carved through the primeval thicket, significantly shortening the journey from Rossburg to Aldersburg.
Even when peace reigns, danger rules this road.
Rayla said.
Now no one dares travel it.
At the edge of the wood by the road stood an enormous willow. Its branches swept down to cover its trunk, looking for all the world like long tresses shrouding a woman's face. Meve had an ill premonition. She did not like the sickly sweet aroma wafting from this tree, nor the metallic buzzing of insect wings. She sent a scout to investigate. He drew aside the drooping branches and stumbled back. There were men bound to the tree, covered in sap oozing from gashes in its trunk. Its heavy scent had attracted swarms of insects, flies, wasps, bees and beetles. They seethed over the bound men, crawling in and out of their ears and nostrils.
Eldain welcomes us to his wood,
Rayla whispered. Meve stepped towards the tree and saw the men stuck to it were all still alive. Those the elves had caught recently writhed and howled for rescue. Those hanging longer merely followed the queen with half-crazed, bloodshot eyes. The Lyrian soldiers stood, daggers in hand, waiting to sever the ropes and free the unfortunate captives. But Meve stopped them with a firm gesture.
Stop! Most are beyond saving, and this may be a trap. Keep your distance from the tree. That is an order.
Meve's men usually carried out her orders without a moment's hesitation. This time, however, they glanced towards her, reluctance writ on their faces. Only after Reynard repeated the order did the Lyrians sheathe their arms and slowly move back towards the road. For a long time thereafter, howls from the old willow trailed them.
Hear that? Nightingales. Unmindful of war, they sing on.
Those are no birds, my lady. Just Scoia'tael scouts use animal cries to communicate. Tell the men to hold to the road, my lady. Anyone wanders in the trees, they don't come out.
Meve's path took her to the village of Iconfurt. Unlike most settlements in the area, not a single human dwelled here. Instead, only elves and dwarves sat on its porches and stared at the passing Lyrians with clear aversion. Not a single greeting was extended to their allies in arms. Not a single peddler tried to hawk their wares. The only sound was that of snapping shutters and slamming doors.
Something's amiss,
Rayla said, furrowing her brow.
Order a halt, my lady, and give me a moment to look around.
You've a quarter of an hour.
Meve said as she dismounted.
And not a moment more.
The queen sat in the shade of a large pear tree. She shut her eyes and listened to the chirping of crickets in the grass, savoring a rare moment of relaxation. But the calm did not last. Within moments, one of her scouts returned, a certain Sergeant Niedermere. Tears streamed down his weathered, scar-pocked face.
Lady, come with us, please. You'll need to see this for yourself.
The sergeant led her to the still smouldering remains of a mill. Her soldiers were picking things out from the ashes. When she got closer, she realized in horror they were human skulls, some no larger than apples.
Tell the villagers to gather by the well.
The queen said in a strained voice.
Or be executed.
The elves and dwarves attempted no denials. They admitted Eldain and his Scoia'tael had helped them round up all the humans in their village, march them into the mill, then set it aflame.
They stole our lands. They filed our names, beat us, murdered us in bloodthirsty pogroms.
Shouted one of the dwarves.
They had it coming to them. Got their comeuppance, I'd say.
Meve was no stranger to the cruelty of war, but the enormous evil she found in Iconfurt overwhelmed her. She felt a terrible weight on her chest, found it hard to draw breath, and her head spun. She felt she could hear the cries of humans being burned alive.
Ma'am,
Whispered Reynard.
you must pronounce something.
Or simply turn the matter over to me, Your Grace.
Rayla interrupted.
I know what to do.
You know what you deserve.
Meve said.
But my soldiers are neither murderers nor executioners, and you are not my subjects. So I shall have you escorted to Rosberg. Let the authorities there mete out justice. With a noose, I hope.
The Queen chose a dozen soldiers and tasked them with seeing the non-humans of Eichenfurt tried by an Eldainian judge. In doing so, she weakened her forces, but saved herself and her Lyrians from having to carry out a bloody sentence by their own hand.
What was that?
Meve asked Reynard, who rode beside her.
A scream. A man's, I think.
Need to investigate. Gather a few men and we ride. Quickly!
The screaming came from a small settlement. When Meve rode up to its farmhouses, her horse reared and neighed in terror. Necrophages swarmed all around. The monsters surrounded a few Nilfgaardians who were trying, with no success, to chase them off with torches. Reynard swept his gaze over the carnage and said,
They cannot stave them off, and their armor is too heavy for them to flee.
Meve was uncertain at first how to act. But when she saw ghouls snatch one of the Nilfgaardians and rip him to shreds, she drew her sword.
No one deserves such a death. Not even a Nilfgaardian. Follow me! Lower your weapons! We're here to rescue you!
Why do you help us?
This evil I shall trample out, root and branch!
Let the ghouls eat him, I say.
Silence! The Queen has made her decision. It worked, Your Grace. The monsters flee.
The Lyrians and the Nilfgaardians fought the monsters side by side, a united force. But when the last necrophage fell, the soldiers immediately returned to their respective divisions. Meve's soldiers looked at the invaders askance, uncertain what would happen next. Suddenly, one of the Nilfgaardians broke ranks and fell to his knees.
Your Grace, I know you have no reason to trust us, but we are not enemies. We hail from Geso, a land Nilfgaard conquered and made its province. We did not ask to fight in this war by force. We were conscripted.
The soldier hefted his sword by the blade and handed it, hilt first, to the Queen.
We yearned for a way to desert, and we have found it. Your Grace, allow us to join your army. We long for the Empire's defeat every bit as much as you do.
Meve walked up to the kneeling soldier and took the sword from his hand.
Well worn. Tell me, how did it receive this chip? Chopping wood? Carving a roast?
The soldier gave no reply, but merely dropped his gaze. That was enough to convince the Queen his conscience was not clean.
Leave this place. And should I ever come across you again, do not count on my mercy.
The deserters took their things and disappeared silently into the trees. Meve turned to the rest of her soldiers. She could tell they were pleased with her decision. On the edge of the Moulderwood there stood a small village, Crumhorn. The hamlet was surrounded by a high palisade, while the villagers carried makeshift weapons, flails, axes, and nail-studded planks. Life as the Scoia'tael's neighbors was clearly not easy. While her men rested, Meve approached two of the villagers. They lowered their heads in respect and fidgeted nervously with their shirt hems.
My lady, reckon you ought to know. Elves meeting traders in the woods at night. Buy swords, herbs.
Rayla, who had overheard the conversation, twisted her mouth in a hateful scowl.
Hawkers stink worse than vermin. Willing to help murderers for coin. Please, milady, we must find them and punish them. You, talk. Where do these meetings take place?
The peasants looked at each other. One scratched his head, the other toed the sand. Finally, one of them blurted out,
Could tell you, my lady, yes, but only for gold.
I see I'm dealing with shrewd men of trade. Fine. Your fee.
Meve took a few coins from her pouch and tossed them on the ground. The peasants dropped on all fours and started snatching the coins from the grass, ignoring the contemptuous gaze of the Queen's soldiers.
Them hawkers wheeled them goods to the old fishing hut north of here. Scoia'tael come a-crawling from the woods, the first crow of the cockerel.
The Queen told her men to prepare to fight the Scoia'tael and their abettors. Black Rayla sat on a fallen trunk and sharpened her sword. The grinding of stone on blade sounded a grim promise.
We got to go. Them elves will get a beating.
Meve arrived at the hut the villagers claimed to be the meeting point for the Scoia'tael and the Hawkers. Torchlight flickered amidst the trees, and she heard the sound of hushed voices.
Your Grace,
Whispered Rayla.
they're in our grasp. We must act quickly before the elves retreat into the woods.
Worry not, Rayla.
The Queen said, patting her on the back.
I shan't let a chance like this slip. Attack!
The Lyrians rushed out of the woods at the unsuspecting elves and merchants. Moments later, the sound of combat filled the dark wood.
Hawker scum!
Defedvara!
There's but one penalty for trading with elves.
Meve pulled off a rare trick. She laid a trap for the Scoia'tael in their own woods. The surrounded elves fought to the bitter end, choosing death over human captivity. Meve cracked open the Hawkers' chests and stared at a mass of tangled oakum. Perplexed, she dug deeper and found the real goods hidden underneath. Bolts with entrail-pureeing hooks, leg-snapping bear traps, and incurable poisons.
Instruments of cruelty,
Said Reynard, looking over the chest's contents.
designed to deliver maximum pain and a prolonged death.
'Tis shameful to fight with such things.
The usually quiet Ache blurted out. Gascon did not share in the general gloom. He reached for one of the arrows and balanced it in his hand with curiosity.
A corpse is a corpse. It cares not how it became one. And these marvels... Oh, my lads could do fine things with them.
My crown I have lost, but my honor remains.
Meve said, grabbing the arrow from Gascon.
I will not allow soldiers under my command to fight with this. Reynard, have these chests thrown in the lake.
In sinking the Hawker's weapons, Meve sent a clear signal that her honor would not tarnish even at the darkest hour. News of the massacre echoed through all of Eldain, cooling the desire of anyone tempted to profit by selling death to elven terrorists.
Have we not passed this way before?
Scouts say no, Your Grace. They mark the trees.
Elves could have erased the marks, or left new ones where we've yet to tread. Best to follow the sun. Only way not to lose your bearings.
Meve was discussing some matter with Gascon when a scout approached. His blood-streaked uniform revealed the matter to be urgent, so the Queen cut short her conversation and requested a report.
We were scouting, milady, and we found a cave entrance. Small scattering of elves guarding it, but we took them right out.
Gascon scratched his chin.
I'd wager 10 Novigrad crowns there are more Scoia'tael squirreled away inside. We strike afore they know we've snuffed out their guards. We might well catch 'em by surprise. But we must act quickly.
Meve considered this, then asked the scout how many entrances the cave had.
We've only seen the one, milady.
The soldier replied.
As I thought, the perfect site for a trap. The elves could easily cut off our escape route. It's too risky. March on.
Meve was riding at the head of the caravan when Black Rayla rode up and leaned towards her. She spoke in a whisper, a hand shielding her mouth.
Your Grace, I've something important to tell you. Yet you can't show anything to miss. Look straight ahead. Make no sudden moves.
Meve nodded slightly and waited for her to continue.
Scoia'tael scouts in the woods, watching us. Eldain's near here somewhere, preparing his attack.
So what do you propose?
Asked the Queen, her gaze fixed on the road ahead.
Let him catch us out in the open. We're sitting ducks. But there are ruins nearby, an elven cemetery. We can find cover behind its walls.
Meve was accustomed to discussing important decisions with all her advisors, but she knew there was no time for consultation now. She had to trust Black Rayla's advice, and so without further delay issued the appropriate orders. Meve's retinue reached the cemetery before dusk. Her soldiers knocked down the marble statuary and piled them into barricades, while scouts took up positions outside the walls to watch for the foe's approach. When the sun set, the woods exhaled the heat of the day, and a thick fog soon arose. Out of the mist stepped Reynard's scouts, bound and pushed forward by elves. One of the Scoia'tael, a sturdy elf with long hair, stood by the cemetery wall and cried,
I am Eldain. I would speak to Meave.
I am she. Speak.
Cadmil and Kedva Genvid, Renna. This place is of great import to us, the Enshe. I would tell you of its monuments, of the weeping Ensevern, carved by 3 generations of sculptors, or of the alabaster relief of King Kellad, so beautiful even the birds would gather to admire it. But I see your men have found our memorials, and, in the way of Dwan, destroyed them without a second thought. I cannot say this comes as a surprise. You've already shown the gods molded you from the basest of matter.
Get to the point, Eldain.
So I shall. As you certainly know, the necropolis is surrounded. Soon there shall be a battle, but it is unseemly to fight in a cemetery. So I ask you to come out into the open.
And surrender our tactical advantage.
I suspected a matter so impractical as respecting the dead would mean nothing to you, Dwan. So I submit one more argument. The lives of the soldiers you sent to spy. If you leave the cemetery, I shall set them free. They will fight at your side. If not, I shall kill them, here and now.
Milady, don't listen to him. He can't be trusted.
Rayla, those are good men. Fabian, Gerrit, Matthias, they've served me for a decade. They'd crawl through 7 hells for their queen. They do not deserve such a death.
I place a high value on my men's lives. Which is why I cannot risk my entire unit for a handful of soldiers.
Your Grace, please, consider.
I reject your offer, Eldain.
As you wish, Renna. Squash me.
In a swift, almost careless movement, Eldain slit the throat of the scout standing nearest to him, then gave the order to attack.
Careful, stay alert. They're cowards all, and sure to have laid traps.
Bladder! Bina!
After a long, bloody battle, Eldain's unit was destroyed, and Eldain himself sat at Meave's feet, defeated and dying.
To die in a cemetery. Something amusing in it, wouldn't you say?
I am surprised you are in the mood for humor.
All my tears I shed years ago. My family, killed in a massacre aimed at eradicating our race. Senseless. Utterly senseless. Reyna, we have lost. Me, my Scoia'tael, the Enshe. We shall vanish from this earth. Your grandchildren will know us in fairy tales only. Lay my bones to rest in a grave. Let me part this world with dignity. Ager Dregared.
Oh, please. How dare he? Look, he laughs, Your Grace. This dog should rot in an open field. Need I mention the willow? The many strung from it.
Mercy you don't deserve, Eldain. I shall leave you where you lie, where rats will gnaw at your bones.
In your boots, I would do the same.
Vasse derad, ep again.
Meave gave the order to march that very night, not waiting for the day to break. She wished to leave behind as soon as possible the moulderwood and the rotting elven remains littering Kedva Genvid's cemetery. Black Rayla rode at the head of the caravan to the Queen's right, a satisfied smile playing on her lips.